The Ashara were born into servitude, not by conquest or mistake, but by tradition, etched in flesh and fiber. Their bodies carried the marks of ancient obedience, delicate tattoos of submission that glowed softly when they obeyed. Across their fractured planet, domed cities echoed with silence, the kind that comes from fear passed down like heirlooms. They did not scream. They did not ask. They worked, knelt, bowed, and were forgotten. Until the humans came. They did not arrive in force. There were no warships, no banners, no anthem of liberation blaring from the skies. Just one silver shuttle, then a camp, then a few dozen smiling strangers in mismatched gear and dusty boots. They brought food and medicine. They asked questions the Ashara had no language for, like, "Do you want to?" or "What do you dream about?" And they brought children. The Ashara had heard of human young, loud, fragile, messy things. But nothing prepared them for the reality. The laughter, the running, the refusal to sit still. No protocols, no fear. The smallest among them wandered freely through Asharan streets like wind-blown leaves, touching things, giggling at statues, interrupting ceremonies without punishment. When the elders tried to impose silence, the children just smiled and said, "Why?" The children played. At first, the Ashara watched in frozen horror. They expected discipline, retribution, alarms. Instead, they saw grown humans sitting cross-legged on the floor, building tiny houses out of sticks, letting children draw on their faces with ink. They saw them laugh when a girl spilled juice on her father's shirt. They saw forgiveness again and again. Then the paper planes came. The first was made from a supply manifest. One of the older boys, Julian, had folded it with exaggerated care, the way a child mimics sacred ritual. Then he ran through the market square and tossed it high. The wind caught it. The thing danced like a silver fish in the sky. Dozens of Asharan eyes followed it, wide and unblinking. It landed at the feet of a young Asharan girl named Shethra. Shethra had never touched a toy. Her hands were trained to clean and carry, not create. But Julian just grinned and said, "You try." She stared at the crumpled paper. Julian showed her how to fold another. He laughed when hers was crooked. She frowned, then laughed too. Something cracked inside her, subtle as morning frost breaking underfoot. By the week's end, hundreds of paper planes dotted the plaza. Not from human hands, but from Asharan ones. Crude at first, then elegant, then absurdly intricate. The elders watched with unreadable expressions, but they did not stop it. Could not. Because for the first time in generations, the children of the Ashara had begun to disobey, not out of malice or rebellion, but because joy was louder than fear. And joy, once planted, grew. The humans didn't lecture. They didn't tear down temples or rewrite scrolls. They asked questions and told stories. They didn't say freedom. They lived it. They let their kids run barefoot, shout across open halls, cry in public without shame. They answered pain with hugs. They taught by example. One day, Shethra handed a paper plane to her grandmother, a woman whose hands had bled for empires long dead. The old woman held the fragile thing and whispered, "What is it for?" "To fly," Shethra said, smiling. "But it has no engine." "It doesn't need one." The Asharan grandmother wept. Across the continent, something strange began to happen. Labor quotas missed their targets, not from defiance, but from distraction. Workers paused to fold paper. Messages began arriving on fluttering wings instead of through cables. Children started hiding during prayer hours to fold fleets of delicate aircraft, releasing them into courtyards like dandelion seeds. The overseers were not pleased. But when they arrived to investigate, they found themselves surrounded not by warriors or rebels, but by paper planes. Thousands of them, resting on shoulders, tucked into belts, flying through the air like whispers. A silent rebellion. A celebration of absurdity. The humans stood by and said nothing. The overseers arrested Julian. The human boy did not cry, but the Asharan children did. Dozens of them marched to the overseer's compound and sat outside for a full day, folding planes. Folding and folding. By sunset, the gates were buried in white. Julian was released. No human fired a weapon. No Asharan broke a law. But something irreversible had happened. A question had taken root. "If they can laugh," one Asharan elder said, staring at a group of children building a tower of paper cups, "why can't we?" Soon, paper wasn't enough. Children carved toys from stone. Elders began telling stories not from scripture, but from memory. Songs returned, hesitant, tuneless, but real. People painted their homes, painted their faces. When no one punished them, they painted each other. And when one overseer tried to strike a child for improper behavior, he was stopped, not by soldiers, but by 6 Asheran mothers standing shoulder to shoulder, eyes clear. "You do not touch the future," one of them said. The overseer lowered his hand. The revolution wasn't televised. It wasn't violent. It smelled of ink and ink-stained fingers. It sounded like laughter echoing through long-abandoned halls. It looked like a single piece of folded paper drifting from the roof of a palace. The Ashara had once built towers of glass to honor servitude. Now those same towers housed libraries filled with crayon drawings and storybooks. Schools where questions were welcome. Rooms with doors that locked from the inside, because now privacy was a right, not a threat. In time, the Ashara would take to the stars, not as slaves, but as singers, artists, engineers, dreamers. And in every ship, in every outpost, there would be one thing, unchanged. A folded paper plane, displayed like a relic. A reminder, not of war, not of conquest, but of children and their impossible defiance. Because chains cannot hold a mind that has once imagined flight. And no empire survives the quiet revolution of joy.